And yes, there we go. Thank you
Yeah,
so
we're
much,
live.
Jessalyn. We're live. So I was just talking with you about this exciting topic we have today. Jessalyn is an expert in how do we transform the experience of the users and the customers from a tax perspective so that we collect the right amount of information at the right time and we don't repeat ourselves and we keep things smooth for the front end for the users to experience your product without the toxins or toxins that can be thrown in that I had to do it that have been interrupting some of these experiences that we are protecting with professionals like you. So before I met you, I didn't even know this was a thing. So
That's right.
we were discovering this together. I'll just briefly introduce you. Jessalyn started her career as a tax expert advisor in one of the big fours, PwC. And in that role, she grew to become a senior manager for tax and legal topics in the US. So she comes from the US but lived everywhere. This is her sixth country. She's a serial migrant. She's involved now with the fintech and crypto industry. She's worked on very edgy, confidential projects that have been, I think, very valuable to develop the skills that she will now share with us today. She is also the managing director of her consultancy, Dune Consultants, and offers products that are specific to this area of work. She'll tell us all about it. I'm really excited. Thank you so much for your time today.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, you're in Italy. I'm in Switzerland. We're not too far.
Not too far.
But yeah, so I wanted to, but first of all, give you the floor and let you tell us a little bit about yourself and how do you present your set of skills in a simple way, because I'm not a very
Yeah.
knowledgeable tax professional. Like explain it to me and to the audience as if we were in a barbecue setting, perhaps.
It's
Tell
funny.
me.
I recently was talking to a peer of mine, so somebody that does stuff similar to me, and I asked her, "How do you explain what you do at a barbecue?" And she said, "It's this endlessly difficult concept because when I mention the word tax or you
Yeah.
mention the word tax, people have already put in their mind what a tax person does. And so you're trying to carefully pick that apart and say, I actually don't do whatever you think it is that I do.
Yeah.
So, okay, how do I explain what I do at a barbecue? Very simply. We'll get into the secret sauce later. We're going to go through it all. Just at a barbecue, I say, hey, Rebecca, you know how if you go open a bank account, they will ask you for your name, your address, your date of birth, your tax ID number?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe at the end of the year, you have an investment account or an account at a crypto exchange, and they tell you, hey, it's the end of the year, download your tax statement, your report, so you can file your taxes.
Right.
Okay, we all kind of know what that is. I help companies do that.
Yeah.
So very simply, that's the experience most people go, oh yeah, I've been asked for my tax ID number. I've downloaded a tax statement before. Okay.
Right. As a
So
user, as a builder of a product, on both ends, you have the same requirements. Well, different requirements, but you still have to comply with a few set of ground rules.
yeah, there's just a lot that goes on in the background to make those experiences happen for you as a customer in a way that complies with the law and in a way that reduces friction for you. Because if every time you log into these fun products that you're using, Upwork, Airbnb, or bank account, if you're confronted with the word tax, that's not normally fun for most people. So
Yeah.
I help companies comply with the rules and make the experience for you low friction
Yeah.
in a way that provides you value. But there's so much that goes on in the background to actually make that work effectively. So we're gonna walk through what that is today.
Awesome. I'm excited. Well, okay, so maybe we dive in. Do you want us to perhaps have any visual support and see how this looks like in an app or in a web page, I guess?
Yeah. Before we do that, most people at the barbecue will say, how did you get into that? Like,
oh yes,
how did you arrive at this thing? Because it's a big leap to say, most people think of the word tax. What comes to their mind, firstly, is not somebody that looks like me. and secondly, they think of like corporate taxes, the taxes of the company, or their own personal taxes. So if I say I'm a tax advisor, tax consultant, most people say, so you can help me do my taxes.
No.
No, I can't. So how did I get here? You gave a little bit of a flavor in the great intro. I did start my career in what we call tax compliance. That's working for one of the big consulting firms, either doing the taxes of companies, helping them prepare a form and filing it to the government, or people's taxes, helping individuals to file their taxes each year. I did that work. As I mentioned, I physically don't fit the mold of what people think a tax accountant is, but I think also my personality. People are very surprised when I tell them that this is my career. I've not really ever fit in really well with that mold. So tax prep became very boring to me as a person. Bless those people that love doing that, because we need them.
Yeah.
It wasn't that exciting to me. And here's why. It, to me, did not feel like I was actually touching or making an impact on the customer of the business. Tax for corporate just always felt like this thing that was in the background. It's a necessary thing, but you're so far off from the customer of the business and how they experience the business. And that was why it was boring to me. So after doing that work, compliance work for a long time, I had this accidental opportunity to get into what we call customer taxes. And so I started working with a company called Oppenheimer Funds. They're now owned by Invesco. It's a mutual fund company. I had this opportunity to oversee and manage the customer tax reporting. So these are investors of mutual funds. And I thought, this is an amazing opportunity because I now get to work with customers of the business and products that they interact with. Right. So to me, I got into this opportunity firstly for that reason. And secondly, when you work in customer taxes, you're not just spending all day working with tax and legal people. You're working with product, you're working with customer service, you're working with marketing and brand and the website. And that was just, I'm a people person, and that was much more interesting to me. So I was with PwC most recently. Now I run my own consulting practice. So now I'm going to show some slides that actually visualize this a little bit more.
And PwC became your client. No, I don't know.
Not to call me though, PwC. No, what I do, there's actually very few people that do what I do. So whenever I run into somebody that works in this space, 90% of the time we know each other already, or we have like 100 people in our network in common. Okay.
Oh, wow. So it's very niche. Yeah.
It's very niche. Okay. This is an example of where somebody would encounter my work, we say. So you go to open a bank account with any bank. I use screenshots from a mobile app. Yeah. You're asked for your personal data. Where were you? What's your date of birth, etc. And I circled this little screen, tax information. When you encounter screens like that, you're encountering my work. Now, this screen is not necessarily my work. This is just an example of an interaction, an average customer. That's what they're seeing.
That's what they, and yeah. So this is how it is today, and this is good. This is bad. This can be improved. How do you see?
I don't want to particularly comment on any of these, just because the next screens might have some
some
company
tips.
names on them that may or may
Okay.
not be my clients.
Okay.
This is just to get a view from people that might be watching this that don't really understand what customer taxes is. This is another example where it's December, January, you're getting ready to do your personal taxes, and you need to go download your year-end tax statement. So a bank or an investment platform might have a tax area for you to download your statements. This is called customer or investor taxes. And then the third example I have, let's say today, Rebecca, you wanted to rent out your apartment on Airbnb and make some extra money, or do some gig work on Upwork. Again, these are not necessarily my clients. These are just examples of, you want to make some money on these platforms, they're going to ask you for so-called tax information so that they can do tax reporting and maybe tax withholding if that's required on any income you're making off of those platforms. So we call this customer taxes, but customer can also mean investor or vendor. I like to think of those all as the same thing. It's effectively payments you make to people that are not your own employees, that it's not taxes of within the company. It's taxes of the people you do business with.
Yeah.
When I say you, I mean Upwork, Airbnb, or the bank.
The product owner.
And so my clients are banks, they are crypto exchanges, they are gig platforms, they are any place that somebody pays an outside party, which can really be anybody. But my clients tend to be platforms, exchanges, banks, etc., that have large volumes of payments to make. And we'll see why that matters in a little bit. Okay. So that's an example of like what I do. But we mentioned earlier, there's all this stuff in the background that ultimately affects how you, me, anybody uses those products. So we're gonna talk through what that means. In this diagram, what I'm showing here is tax and legal. Those words, they tend to elicit in our minds this department that tells us what the rules are and just projects out a message. Hey, this is the law. Please comply with it. That's what we normally think of as tax and legal. Then you've got product and engineering teams at Upwork, Airbnb, the bank, the crypto exchange. And they're making lots of interesting products every day. And in our picture, our story here, that product is a fishing rod. But I use the word customer experience, and the title of our discussion here today is CX disruptions. CX is just a short way of saying customer experience.
Yeah.
The customer experience is not just the product and does it work? The experience is, what is the weather like for that person when they go fishing? What is the quality of the water? Is there an abundance of fish in that water? Do they have a nice beverage and a friend with them? So that's the whole experience of the product.
Yeah.
And what I find, and this is one of the opportunities that I saw for getting into this area, is because tax and legal tends to be viewed or operate as a department that just sort of word vomits the law. What you end up with a lot of times is what I call these toxins that get released into the water. And they're affecting the user experience of an otherwise well-designed and compliant product. That fishing rod could be the best fishing rod on the market. But if your manufacturing and development process is leaching toxins into the water, that customer is not having a great experience with your product.
Yeah. Oh my God. And it's definitely going to have an impact on everything you do, not just the money you could be saving if you were smart about your reporting, but also the money you could be making if things were more frictionless.
Yeah. And I mean, the simple way to explain this without pictures is most people think of customer taxes, as purely a compliance obligation. That's a law I need to deal with.
Yeah.
And that's what can create toxins. When you actually look at customer taxes as a part of that customer's experience with your product, you really open up the world of possibilities of delivering value to them.
Yeah.
And so we'll get into a little bit more of, well, what's a toxin? What do you really mean by toxin?
Yeah, perhaps. Go ahead and tell us a bit more.
Okay. I'm gonna explain in words before I dump the words on the screen, because otherwise people get distracted by the words on the screen. So all this stuff that happens in the background, it's all that manufacturing process. The customer using the product doesn't see the manufacturing process. They don't care about the manufacturing process. They just want to have a good experience. So what is the manufacturing process in the background that's affecting customer taxes? One of those is when companies have an unclear strategy or brand around customer taxes. Why are we doing this? Is it purely a regulatory requirement? Or do I think I can actually add value to my customers? Another toxin example is when companies are too strict with the requirements. They say, this is what the law says, and therefore I must do everything word for word. And then what they end up doing is over collecting excess information from their customers. So you can imagine if you and I go to open a bank account and we're asked for like 100 data points about our taxes, we might just give up and say, oh, I could go to this other platform and they're not going to ask me for as much information.
Yeah.
So when you follow such strict, here's the 100 things, you risk actually losing customers on customer acquisition. And possibly also customer retention. So over or under requesting information can be a problem as well, because if you and I go to open, this account and we're asked for no information, we're like, oh, that's great. But if 5 days later we're trying to use your product and you have to come back to us and say, oh, we didn't ask you for that 5 days ago, but we need it now. We call that multiple touch points.
Yeah.
Because people don't like tax, they want the least touch points possible. So how do you find that balance of getting the right information at the right time without bothering your customer too much? A lot of companies struggle with that. Incomplete or stale data. I read this statistic the other day, and they call it like data rot. It's this idea that we've become highly mobile people, and almost 40% of our data about our customers becomes stale within a year. Stale meaning they've moved country, or they got married, or they got divorced. Yeah. Some information about them in our records has changed, and we don't have the right information about them. And that means that their tax reporting is wrong. They have to ask us to change it. We have to amend it and refile it and re-download it. That's not a good experience for the customer, and it increases the costs for the business.
Yeah.
Some of these topics can also create tax withholding for the customer. And if customer is expecting to be paid 100 and they only get paid 70, and the reason was because the company had bad data about them, we call that over withholding. It wasn't necessary to have done if you had gotten the right data about your customers from the get-go.
Yeah.
And then sort of a last topic is about process. When companies have manual processes, I think most people can appreciate manual processes carry so many risks about errors and mistakes, but also it creates what we say as a single source of failure. If there's a manual process and only 2 people know how to do it, well, what if those 2 people get sick or retire or move on to a different position in your company? Now you need to figure out what to do. Your customers experience delays in their requests or their inquiries. Also, untrained customer agents is a big problem. This topic is so niche, it's really difficult to train your customer service agents to give the right answers. Imagine, Rebecca, if you got hired by a bank today and a customer writes in with a question about their taxes. Would you know how to answer their question? Like, hey, do I need to pay tax on this money I made?
I would have no idea. I wouldn't have any consultant on call either to reach out to.
Yeah, so you need to be trained both in how to be a good customer service agent, but also how to answer questions about a very sensitive topic and in a way that you're not giving the customer tax advice.
No.
Because you can't. But you want to be helpful.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I see companies, they go so strict on the spectrum to say, I'm sorry, we can't answer that question for you, to become just incredibly unhelpful. So where's a way that you can, and I help my clients do this, how do you find that middle ground where you are helpful to the customer and you point them in the right direction without giving them tax advice?
Yeah.
Okay, so what does that all look like? This is effectively those high level topics
that you mentioned. Yeah.
But all of that happens in the background. You as the user of the fishing rod at the water, you don't see all that. Or you, Rebecca, you go open a bank account. You don't know that all of this is happening in the background. Yeah. You just want to download your tax statement.
My experience, but I'm not sure how that got to. Well, especially if you're over or under requesting and you have many touch points, that's definitely the part that would annoy me, I think.
Yeah, or like, hey, why is this bank asking me for this information, but that one's not? Or, hey, I went to go open up an account on Upwork or Fiverr to do some gig work. They asked me for some info, but the other one didn't. And so that's another thing I help my clients with, is to understand what their competitors are doing, not from a competitive advantage perspective, but to know, are you like way out here asking for things that aren't legally required? And we'll have an example of that in a later slide, where there was a company that did that, and they put themselves in the news
for that. Wow. Okay. All right.
Okay. So this is that next slide. Like, why does this matter to a business? This slide will resonate, I think, with some of us as users of these products, but more relevant to the company. Why does it matter? I mentioned those toxins can lead to problems with customer acquisition and retention. So if you have such a high friction onboarding experience for your customers or investors or vendors, they might just go somewhere else. Also, if you ask for too little information when you onboard them and then have to ask for extra information later, you create too many touch points with the word tax in them, and you might have a retention problem.
Right.
The second one is the most obvious: financial and penalty risks. Like, these companies can actually owe penalties and fines to the government if they swing too far one direction. They don't comply enough with the rules. And reputational risk. So I try to help my clients stay out of the newspaper headlines and off of Reddit. When when tax is not mentioned in the Reddit forums, that's a good outcome for my clients. So I have 3 examples of these. So, and some of these are quite old. Some of them are not, but they're quite famous examples in my industry. Some years back, maybe 10 years ago, Citibank, they're a very famous bank in the United States and around the world. They started issuing these tax forms called 1099s that are also given to the government. So the copy is given to the Internal Revenue Service. They started issuing these 1099s one year to their customers when their customers earned frequent flyer miles. Now, you and I know, if I get some frequent flyer miles, I can't go buy groceries with those.
No.
And so they're not really portable money. So understandably, this surprised the customers of Citibank. It also surprised the Internal Revenue Service. The government was like, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And they were the only one that did that. And so I was not a part of this, so I'm purely speculating. But when I see stories like this, what it says to me is someone in tax, legal, or compliance read a rule very strictly and then told someone, we need to do this, and they did it without stepping back and saying, are my competitors doing this? Is anyone else doing this? And does this make sense? So that was a reputational problem and a customer acquisition problem, because if you're the only one doing that, I'm going to take my business somewhere else where they don't do that.
Yeah.
And the second one, a more recent example, Poshmark. They are a website where you can like buy and sell trade clothes, like Vinted is another example. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
They have to start doing this tax reporting that's required by law, and it's causing a lot of stress for their customers. And this article from a famous investment website was sort of saying Poshmark seemed to be disappointing investors and was having a lot of problems that were related to, amongst other things, the negative impact of customer tax reporting. Again, I wasn't involved with this, but when I read these articles, what I tend to see is there was a communication problem. And customers weren't being informed adequately. There wasn't good information, maybe just being sort of blindsided by the government all of a sudden receiving information about you. Not fun for customers. So communication and strategy maybe was misfired. Again, I don't know. That's just what I read when I see these stories. And the third one, very simply, there was a bank that was they had incorrect and possibly stale information on file about a customer. They reported that customer for tax reasons, and that customer sued the bank for incorrectly reporting their information, and the bank had to pay them damages.
Okay. That's the kind of stuff that happens if we don't have people like you on board, I suppose.
Well, I hope I could have helped these clients with this, but I never guarantee it. But those are what I read when I sort of see these stories.
Yeah.
Okay. People tend to be familiar with the words AML, KYC. AML stands for anti-money laundering.
Mm-hmm.
So if you and I open an account at a lot of these same places, they're going to ask us a lot of questions about who we are, where our money comes from, what we're doing with it, who our customers are, to help prevent money laundering. Anti-money laundering laws are good. They help prevent terrorist financing, human trafficking, money making its way through systems bad things are done with. But anti-money laundering primarily serves the government. Like, you and I have never needed to go to our bank and download an anti-money laundering report. Like, it's not a thing me or you need. We're not like, oh, what bank can I go to for my money laundering?
Needs.
Yeah, that's not a thing. What's not a need?
Mm-hmm.
But that's different than customer taxes. While customer taxes is a legal and compliance obligation,
yeah,
my customers, these businesses, here are some examples of customer needs. You're a crypto exchange and your customer says, I made a lot of money selling stocks and crypto this year. What tools do you give me that make filing and paying my taxes as simple as possible? Or, hey, I freelanced on Uber, Upwork, or house hacked on Airbnb. What tools do you give me to help me file and pay my gig work taxes? How to make that easy? Those are actual needs of customers outside of the company's legal obligations they have to take through.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Do you have an example where you've you use a platform or a tool and you think like, my life would be easier if?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this. Oof. Because I use so many different platforms, like I have Stripe, I'll have PayPal, then I'll be using Fiverr. It's a bit like Upwork.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm familiar with these platforms. I don't Uber or Airbnb, but I will be a user of these services. So I'll have accounts on so many different and so many different subscriptions. What I do is I yeah, I look up at the end of the year, what have I been spending on? And then it's always surprising, whether it's apps, and then you go on Apple Store to collect also and then subscriptions of any sort, like, Zoom or LinkedIn. So I have so many of those different tools that I use, TransferWise, wisenow.com, to pay people to receive. And I guess it's just very scattered, when I'm doing this, it's completely manual and Excel sheets. I don't have a system that can collect this. I don't even know if that's a thing. Maybe it is. I should look it up. But
exactly. And the information you're getting from all of these platforms is all in different formats, and it's all probably in different currencies as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
how am I gonna?
You are getting all this information from these different platforms, but you need to collect and collate all that. There's a lot of opportunity to make filing and paying taxes as simple as possible.
Wow, this would be a big niche in the market. I bet if you can, cater to entrepreneurs, whether big or small, but small first, I guess, because it would save a lot of time. Now, it is an exercise that I learned to enjoy, because then you're like, oh, let me see where my money is going and how I can be more strategic next year. So maybe it is part of the exercise. I don't know.
But you just made a great point as well. And this is something that I work with my customers on, my clients as well. Most people think of taxes as a year-end thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's January, it's December, and now I need to do it.
Yeah.
There's 2 reasons to think of taxes all year long. Not that we want to think about it, but monthly. There's 2 reasons. For you as an entrepreneur, the customer of these platforms, you want to understand your cash flow. And so if your taxes are going to be this much or they're going to be this much, that affects your take-home pay and your cash flow. So if you actually had a tool that would enable you on a monthly basis to be digesting the information from all of these platforms, paying in any estimated taxes, so you don't spend it before you have it, and better understand your cash flow on a monthly basis, it actually makes January less stressful, because you've done each month, and then January you're just tagging on December. You've understood your cash flow, and it's not this once per year exercise of downloading all the stuff.
It is.
And then on the business side, it's the same issue, which is, we mentioned some of those toxins on the previous screen about untrained customer service agents.
Yeah.
There's a problem with training people and getting the right materials in place. But also, if this is only a once per year process, no amount of training during the year is going to solve that. These individuals don't deal with it on a recurring basis, and they'll just forget it. Yeah. And so I work with clients to find ways to look through data on a monthly basis, look at data quality, do dry runs and test runs of tax reporting before you get to December. And so every month you're improving your data quality, you're looking for stale or incomplete data, and you're fixing that throughout the year. So when you get to January, you're just filling in December, and you've created a process by which it's just the next month. I actually helped a client where they had an annual process. So everyone did it once per year. It was manual. So someone in a central department, and give me a second. Someone in a central department would email out 40 departments and say, here's an Excel template, fill it in, send it back. Then that department would review the templates with the data. And if there were problems, they had to send it back and kind of cycle through it a few times. Ultimately, to aggregate all 40 sheets of data to prepare the tax reporting. And they would do this in January, and they had 30 days before the government deadline. Every year they missed the deadline and were late because That's a very manual process, and it happened once a year, so no one remembered what they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
Recurring mistakes. I came in and I worked, so my client had a team, and I worked with the team to automate and build a tool that would do 80% of the checks automatically. So a person didn't need to do it. Like
What a relief.
making sure that this cell only has 9 digits in it and they're all numbers, not letters.
Yeah.
You know, you can automate that. So we automated 80% of the checks. And then we started doing it a quarterly and then monthly at the end of the year. We would send out the spreadsheets in like April, then again in July, then again in September, October, November, December. So then by January, all these teams around the world were just doing what they did last month. And they were filling in just December because they'd already cleaned up and fixed all the problems with the previous months.
Yeah.
So a process that would take 2 months, January and February, once we made it an annual process, we got it done in 3 weeks in January. Done. So actually, so I'm glad you raised that. Like that idea of making tax not a thing in January, I think is both relevant for like you as a customer, as an entrepreneur, but also the businesses that are delivering tax information to you.
But they have their cycle. I guess you can always ask for it, but then it's a manual process if you're outside of the typical end of year, beginning of the year periods.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well,
so really... that does lead to this next conversation, which is like, what are some more of these opportunities for these businesses? And we've kind of touched on a few. So Brandon, I'm gonna knock through the 4, and then like we'll talk through each of one, like with examples. Brand and strategy development of the actual products and how customers interact with them. Lifecycle mapping. That's both the life cycle of the customer using your product and the data acquisition, data storage, data cleansing, data access, etc. The third one is what I call health checks. This is a great opportunity for businesses that are already doing customer, investor, vendor reporting. And I can come in and look at what they're doing today and give them a health report about how it's going.
Yeah.
And the last one is the bonus round, which is stakeholder relationship building. So a couple of examples of these: brand and strategy development. I had a customer or client where there's these tax reporting rules in the United States that non-US companies can optionally choose to comply with. They don't have to do it.
Yeah. Right.
But so if they decide to do it, they have to comply, otherwise they get penalties.
And do it well then. Okay.
That's right. So don't choose to do it if you're not going to do it well. So the natural question would be, why would anybody optionally sign up to comply with these US tax laws? And the reason is it's a good customer service. It can improve the experience and the take-home pay of this client's customers by doing this program. But that company signed up for that program like 20 years ago. And so the people that do it now are not the same people that did it 20 years ago. So there's this big team executing on these rules and making sure everything is strictly followed, And I come in as an advisor to do a health check. And my first question was, why are you doing this? And they went, well, because we're required to. I said, no, you're not. You optionally signed up to do it, and momentum has meant that you kept doing it. Are your customers still asking for this? Is this an important part of your business? Are you winding it down, maintaining, or increasing this part of your business? And they didn't know the answer. So this was a simple example of not necessarily strategy, like what are my competitors doing? This was, I'm doing something and I haven't actually stepped back and asked myself, why am I doing it? So that was step one in our health check, was before we look through, are you meeting the requirements? Let's understand why we're doing it. Lifecycle mapping. I mentioned it's both the data lifecycle and the customer lifecycle. So I had a client, a crypto exchange, where we looked at the lifecycle of data. How is it acquired from customers? How do you validate it and make sure it meets the requirements? How do you store it? And how do you access it later for reporting? Because as we mentioned earlier, any mistakes along that data journey, that data map, can create mistakes and amendments. Your customer downloads their taxes and says, hey, this information isn't right. Can you fix it? And now you have to kick off a whole process of amending the information, amending the tax form, delivering the tax form to the customer. Lots of touch points, lots of processes, not a great experience with the customer. And then the life cycle is related to data. When your customer comes to you, what information do you need to ask up front? What should you wait to ask for later? Because if you ask the whole world from them the moment they open an account, they're more likely to give up and go to a different platform. But if you ask too little and then have to ask them a million times later for more data, that increases touch points and it makes their experience less nice. Yeah. So we look at both of those things and look for opportunities to improve it, reduce penalties, reduce touch points.
I see. And you see, it's a group. It takes a team to do all of this work. It's not the kind of work you can develop solo, or maybe with some tools. Maybe you want to name some of those. I don't know if there's any tip that you can leave our viewers with, like what they can apply today.
Well, when we say we, there could be a tool involved, but we is usually like, when I'm working with my client, a lot of time I'm not working with their tax and legal department. I'm sitting down with their data teams and their engineers. Yeah. And I'm saying, show me your logic and rules for how you store this data. Show me what data points do you store and which ones do you not? Are you asking customers for data, but then you're never storing it anywhere that you can access it later?
Yeah.
So we is usually in lifecycle mapping, a lot of data people, engineers, project managers, etc.
You don't really look or work like the typical tax advisor, because tax advisors don't sit with engineers and go through those checks. Like, not in my experience.
And that is actually, we'll jump to the bonus stakeholder relationship building point. That's a great segue. Most people think of tax and legal, as we showed in our little, alert system, as the people that push out bad news. They're the ones that tell us there's a law and we have to comply with it.
Yeah.
And they're very well known for being the people that say, no, you can't do that. Now, I've met plenty of tax and legal people that are better than that.
Yeah.
But even if the reality can be very different from perception. So even if they're very collaborative with the business, if the perception is that they're not, then you're in the same outcome. So I help my clients with relationship building to bridge that gap between product and engineering that want to build great products and tax and legal that want product and engineering to build compliant products. I act as this intermediary to say, how do we find ways to say yes? How do we find ways to say, here's what you can do?
Yeah.
But also, because tax and legal have a perception, whether it's real or not, of giving out lots of requirements, the other space that I'm operating in is what you could say is like risk profile and finding the soft and hard edges. This fits into the health check topic. there could be a rule that says, if this happens, then you must do this. But what I do is I will sit down with, it depends, it could be marketing or account managers, and say, let's look at the world of customers first and find out how many times that one thing might happen.
Yes. Because we can customize the whole journey for this one in a lifetime occurrence, right? Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
let's be practical.
Yeah.
If there's 100 rules to comply with, I'm not going to be able to implement all 100 at once.
No.
And so I need to put them in an order of priority.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I mean, there's some things you can't avoid. Well, I'm not even saying avoid, but, give your energy to.
Yeah. Or I just can't get to them today. It's a tomorrow thing.
Yeah.
And so I help my clients say, what do your customers look like? How many are this? How many are this? How many are this? And then we find those 100 things and say, well, okay, because the greatest financial risk or the greatest customer acquisition and retention risk are these 10 things. They're going to the top. And those other things that might affect one customer or could cost us a $200 penalty.
Yeah,
they're at the bottom of the list.
Yeah.
We'll get to it.
Yeah.
It's on the list, but we have to be practical in how we look at things. And a lot of times the perception of tax and legal is that they don't necessarily have the ability to do that. They just know what the rule says. So again, that their reality might be different, but the perception of the business is what it is, can be what it is. So I act as this middle ground between what do the rules say and how will we make this work? And also I mentioned soft and hard edges. Most people think, well, the law is the law. There is no soft edges. But if it was that obvious, we wouldn't have lawyers and tax advisors if it was so clear.
Yeah.
So we have to find, what does that rule really mean? What is it intended for? What is the practical reality of it? Is it a priority for the government, or are there other items that are higher priority for them? And it just helps us organize the world. And so we do that a lot in health checks, but also the stakeholder relationship building.
So I'm going to open for questions, because I think maybe we will have some from the audience and the followers here on Instagram, on LinkedIn. We also have this live on Facebook, and it's going to be recorded onto YouTube. So people who did not get the chance to see it will get to see it there. I have my own set of questions, but maybe I'll wait for those who might be curious, to see, their specifics are different in their companies. But I mean, my first thought is always, can we, especially in crypto, because this is where you operate, can we keep up? Because the innovation is so real, and so things are happening so fast in this industry. I think one of the challenges is to translate what it meant 10 years ago or 100 years ago. I don't know when things were established. The legislation that will apply, and how you can sort of contextualize it to today's challenges with all the products that we have today that we didn't have before. And it's moving at a very fast pace, creating opportunities that it wasn't a thing, right? Marketplaces or all social media for that. I don't know what is out there. And one thing that you have is the perspective of the US, but also of Europe, since you've been navigating those two poles very comfortably. So that's one thing. And then the second question would be, I handle data from all kind of poles, like Brazilian, Europeans, Americans. So they trust me with their data, and it's completely different in different regions how you deal with those data points. And maybe we should always lean towards the most cautious way of dealing with data, and what region is most exemplary, maybe, for us to have a north. Because I know other people have also these challenges in their businesses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two
Anyways,
great questions. And if I forget the second one, remember it, because I got to answer the first one first. Okay. Crypto, loads of opportunities. Crypto and digital assets. These can be NFTs, crypto, stable coins, or securities that reference crypto, investment funds that hold crypto. There's an amazing amount of products and innovation out there. From a customer tax perspective, back to brand strategy and development, I always start with, if you're an exchange, are you compliance first? Are you an exchange that supports and wants to be at the forefront of regulation? Or, and they certainly exist out there, are you an exchange that wants to push back on as much regulation and only do the I don't want to say the minimum, but the things that it's 100% certain that you must do it.
Okay.
Now, we never reach 100% certainty because, again, if we had 100% certainty, we wouldn't need lawyers and tax advisors. We would be out of work. We never reach 100%. So that's always a first step with just like the exchanges, is your brand strategy and how do you view customer taxes? Is this I will fight it to the death, or is this I want to be at the forefront and I also want to look for features and products that my customers need? There's a lot of innovation in the crypto and digital asset space. I'm so excited for all of the different startups and companies out there that are innovating products. There's an ambulance going by. Hold on. Oh, can't cover them. I should have just muted it. I'm like, oh, where's the control? But what's interesting in crypto, everything moves at such a high speed, and not just the product, but our transactions. We have so many transactions that everyone is overwhelmed at the volume of data and how to handle it. So there's a lot of opportunity in the market to help customers do their taxes better. Lots of interesting products out there. And I think that the future of, let's say, tax reporting generally, but really more specifically data, is data portability. So that's one of the promises of Web3, is that you and I own our data. Primary example, my own personal interest. I'm excited for the day when I own my health data. I move a lot. I'm a serial migrant. Every time I move country, I've got a brand new health record from zero, and I have to call this doctor to fax over or mail some records to this doctor. I've got like a trail of confusion, and I really look forward to the day that I have that data on a blockchain and I can move it with me from doctor to doctor. And I think that that's the future of all kinds of data, including our tax data. So crypto, lots of really great opportunities. I'll jump to your second question, and I see a question in the chat. So your second question was about data and privacy. Okay. So in crypto and digital assets, there is a heightened and very high level, heightened importance to our security of data. And the sort of simple reason is, in the traditional financial services world, we trusted the banks to secure it. There's all these passwords and dual authentication and fraud detection to make sure that someone couldn't get into my account. But with crypto and digital assets, it's on me. It's in my wallet, unless I hold it in an exchange. I'm in control of that. So security and of our information is paramount, but also our privacy around our information. I think a lot of people incorrectly think of the blockchain as a place of anonymity, and it's the opposite. If you know my wallet address and you know that that's mine, you could follow everything I do. You can see where I spend my money and where I send my money. So from a tax perspective, it's very interesting. Lots of interesting developments and very academic discussions around tax information and who it's shared with and how it's shared with them. And do I own it? Do you own it? But sort of an ending comment is GDPR. We didn't mention that earlier, but it's back to an earlier toxin slide. There is an important topic around asking for too much information. So the sensitivity is, Some companies will over request information to reduce future touch points.
Yeah.
They ask for a lot up front, creates a lot of friction. But if they're asking for information that legally they weren't required to ask at that moment, and they could have asked for it later, they might be in violation of GDPR. Because GDPR says for personally identifying information, you need a legal basis by which to ask for it. So just saying, I'd like to simplify my processes, ask for it now rather than later, that's not good enough. Mm-hmm. So I'm not a GDPR expert, but I know enough about how it's adjacent, like AML and KYC, to taxes to be able to tell my clients, hey, check with your GDPR lawyers before you start asking for this extra information and make sure that it's compliant.
No, I'm just like phone, email. That's it. I don't want to know if you're married, if you have kids, where you live. Take it out of the CV, all of it. Your nationality. Yes, nationality, yes. Where you're resident, but no,
where you're legally allowed to work, fine.
Yeah, that's it. I'm so basic with this stuff now. I mean, I always was, but in Switzerland, it's funny because they want to have your religion. They want to know if you're married, how many kids, where you live, in the CV. Like, yeah. Why? This is so not needed. I don't care if you're married. But thank you so much, Jessalyn. Okay, if there's one more
question.
Go ahead.
Also, I did want to just call out something you mentioned. Sometimes because I'm an American citizen, I have a somewhat American accent. I think a lot of people are confused by it. People think, oh, you just deal in US taxes. That's not true. Customer tax reporting rules are largely based on the same concepts around the world. And then you just sort of have to know the 10 or 20% differences that occur in different geographies. And that's what I do. So what I do is transferable. It's part of the reason I'm living in my 6th country. My clients are everywhere in Europe, primarily EU countries, the UK, North America, simply because those countries are at the forefront of developing these laws. And a lot of other countries tend to follow maybe 1 or 2 years later. So that's just where most of my clients tend to be. So the question from Martin was, Jessalyn, what's your point of difference between classical tax advisor companies? What's your point of difference? Point of difference versus classical
versus like the big fours, or
I will say this both as somebody that worked in the classical tax advisor companies, a number of them, well, not a number of them, but a few of them, but also somebody that talks to their clients about, why did you hire me versus contacting these other companies? And the primary differentiator that I hear and that I've seen is the classical tax advisors tend to be the people that say, hey, we've read 300 pages of legislation and here's exactly what it says. Maybe we've written you a memorandum. Good luck. Here you go. And then they've got to figure out what to do with it. So I can write memos. I know what the law says. I'm good at that. That's not where I love spending my time. I will happily take the memorandum and say, okay, what are we going to do with it now? And because I've worked in-house, I've been in the dark, dark depths of data and how systems work. And a lot of times the advisors at the classical tax advisor companies have never reached that depth. And so they always just kind of hit a wall where they don't know as much. They can't advise much further down because they haven't been in there.
In the trenches,
That's right. So I think back to an earlier comment to summarize, the big advisors tend to be like that tax and legal department. They tell you a lot of, well, here's what the law says. And I'm really that middle space to really bridge the gap with product and engineering. Love that question.
Yeah, I love that. Not a barrier. Well, where can we find you? Just I think you may want to just let me see. I think it's in there you go. Perfect.
That's my website, duneconsultants.com. I write a blog about, very niche topics. So that might not be so sexy for everybody. Primarily LinkedIn. You'll find much more on LinkedIn that's sort of plain language stuff. My blogs tend to be dense, getting into the detail. I have a whole blog about crypto and crop sharing agriculture. Very nerdy.
Okay.
So LinkedIn is a great place to find me if you're like, ugh, dense tax stuff. Dune Consultants, I have an interesting blog there. This Dune.tax, if you just type that into a browser, that's my calendar. So if anybody would love to chat for 25, 30 minutes over a coffee, happy to chat with them.
One last thing, before I spoke with you, I was speaking with one of my clients, and he's into alternative proteins and impossible milk, impossible meat, and all of these trendy, nutritious food made in a lab. He's invested in it. He has a fund that manages to bring impact investment solutions to his clients. And he was telling me how, this is going to be the future. We're just waiting for the legislation to figure this out. And then we're all going to be eating this because the supermarkets already, we know people want this. It tastes good. He actually tried it and he was like, it's the same. It's the same. So would you wonder in those? No, I mean, that's more of a lobbyist thing to do, I suppose. But how comfortable would you be in those very futuristic? It has nothing to do with crypto, but would it transfer over those skills of yours? How would you navigate this space?
I say, I can set myself down in any environment and generally do well because my passion is solving problems. And that's why going and reading the law and writing a long memo, I can do it. But I really love actually finding the problem, finding the solution, and making it work better. So anytime I'm put in a place where like the world has a problem, or this business has a problem, or this customer has a problem, I just find a lot of joy in solving that problem. And so, yes, I could see myself ending up in those places.
Yeah.
And, one of the interesting problems that I would like to get involved in more, and I've been kind of dabbling my fingers around in, is back to that data portability comment from earlier. There's a future where I imagine we don't even need these tax reporting laws that, the banks and the platforms and the exchanges need to comply with, because it's just on the blockchain and it follows us, that we have like a digital identity that already carries that information with it.
Yeah.
And so I have been learning about, companies out there in blockchain technology that are working on solving this problem, because it is a problem that must be solved in close collaboration with the tax authorities. So in my profession, I have and I do work with governments, tax authorities, not in a lobbying kind of way. I don't lobby for law. I help operationalize what the law says. And so I work with those governments on, what does your law say, and is it practical? Are people able to actually implement this? But I see this really interesting future of like going beyond the law and actually leveraging the blockchain instead. I think that's fun.
Awesome. No, that was just I was curious about it when he pointed this problem, and I thought, okay, is this a legal problem? Is this I mean, it's not a tax issue, but it's definitely a typical scenario where the technology is moving faster than we can keep up with it from a legislative and regulatory standpoint. And so that's for a different talk, but thank you so much. I'm so pleased. You've been, I'm so lucky that I can reach out to you, and I hope people will also do the same for this. This was very informative.
Yeah, and I also hope that, I think that a lot of these concepts are transferable to non-tax topics. So, I think that's how we sort of crafted this conversation, is this is my niche, this is my specialty. But the idea is transferable to other things. And so I hope anyone that was watching this, that's like, I have nothing to do with taxes and customer taxes, there's still relatable nuggets that can transfer to other things like Beyond Meat.
Yes, Beyond. No, thank you so much for getting into customer taxes. You wouldn't probably be here if it wasn't for this journey, really unique journey of yours. And it's inspiring for those watching us and who started in accounting or in audit and tax advisory and who aren't too sure how to grow. There is a lot of space to grow in this industry.
And I do want to say, like, let's do like a little throwback special shout out. I mentioned earlier in the discussion that I was sort of given an opportunity. I kind of accidentally got into this. The quick story on that was I had reached what I felt was the end of what I wanted to get out of what I was doing with tax compliance. I didn't know what was next. I had spent most of my career not in the driver's seat. So I would, anytime someone would give me an opportunity, I just said, sure, I'll try that.
Yeah.
And in this instance, I applied for a job at Oppenheimer Funds that I was not qualified for. Most women don't do that, but I was like, throw my hat in. And they called me, the HR person called me, and she allowed me an interview with her and the hiring manager.
Yeah.
And it didn't work out. It wasn't the right fit. As we mentioned earlier, I would have been like in a dark room working with 2 people. And I was like, I want to work with more people. I'm a social animal. A month later, that HR person called me and said, we've had this other role open up and we think you'd be a good fit for it. Could I send you the job spec? I said, sure. She sent me the job spec. It was a promotion in title. It was a higher title than I had had previously. And I read the job spec and it was all this customer tax lingo. And I called her up and I said, I will be very honest with you. I've heard of these words. I know nothing about this.
Oh
Zero.
But I want to learn.
I want to learn. And I figure you called me because you are looking for the right person that could figure it out, given that there's not a lot of people on the market that understand this stuff. So you're really just looking for the right person that wants to solve some problems. And you think that's me. And she said, absolutely. We'd love to interview you for the position. And that's how I ended up in customer taxes. So that's also a message to recruiters and hiring people. I had like 2% of the qualifications for that job, but that HR recruiter, she saw something and she took a chance.
Yeah. Oh my God. This is for what's happening with Facebook, with Twitter, with Stripe right now. Yes. What you're saying is important so
message.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you. And also
transferable skills.
Yeah. Thank you for going on your own and being, your own boss at this point, choosing who you want to work with. And I bet your projects are a lot more cool than the ones you had before as an employee. Now you're going to have other problems as an employer. I'm faced with those. But they're really fun issues to go through. And it's a learning curve. Well, thank you again. I think we don't have more questions for now. There's a lot to digest. You will be contacted by the audience later. And we will also share the link for the YouTube video for the recording of today's live.
Fantastic.
So yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Jessalyn. I'll speak to you again very soon. Maybe another live next year about a different topic.
See where crypto's reached that point.
Exactly. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for watching.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.